Hi, I'm Maurice Wheeler, Chief Strategy Officer at Kids Industries. My colleague Josh is going to be taking the middle section of this particular presentation. But we are here today to talk about co-consumption of content, but talking about how parents and children are engaging with content, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, where they're doing it, and hopefully answering all those questions. Kids Industries is a kids-focused agency that specialises in research, strategy and creative. So this kind of falls within our research and strategy remit. So yeah, talking about intergenerational co-consumption of content. We actually did some specific research for this, for the CMC. So this is an exclusive piece of research that we're releasing for you guys today and yesterday. We did it with 1,000 UK parents, children aged between the ages of 4 and 12. It was a 15-minute online survey, and we did ask the parents to include the children in that. So it's both a parent and a child based survey. And as well as quant, we also did quals. We did 8 in homes. We did 60 to 90 minutes of qual sessions with families throughout the UK, asking them again about the whys behind all the numbers. As I am the Chief Strategy Officer, I need to give a ridiculously large frame of reference against which the context of the rest of the talk will be set. So this is my frame of reference, if you like. First of all, children and parents are really stressed. We all know that. We've actually heard a lot about children and parent stress. We know that 1 in 6 children have a lot of worry about not being good enough and making mistakes. And actually, if you include those that have a slight worry to a lot of worry, that goes up to 80%. So a lot of children have a lot of stress and a lot of worry. We know that children are seeing a lot of inappropriate stuff online and stuff that they find harmful or worrying or concerning. But it's not just children. We also know that parents are stressed and worried about being a parent in the modern world. It's tough. They don't really know how to do it. It's not something that a lot of the situations and scenarios that their children are facing is not something that they had to face as a child, let alone something that their parents could help coach them through. So there's a lot of things, online bullying and social media pressures, which are really, and also kind of even things like over-testing. So that's a lot of stresses that they don't know how to manage, and they don't know how to do that. So there's a big stress in both children as well as parents. Alongside that stress, there's also this worry that they're not spending enough time with their children. Parents now work more than they ever did before. So if you look at couple families where they both work, that's now 48% of couple families where they both work. So we're seeing actually parents are spending more time away from home and more time in work than ever before. Only 1 in 5 families genuinely think that they've got the balance right between time to spend with the family, but also money that they need to earn as well. And 1/3 think that they just don't have enough of either. So we're kind of getting all these various pressures coming in on parents. 1/3 said that that's ultimately affecting their relationship with their children. Interestingly, a lot of that is a perceived thing. A lot of that kind of is a perceived guilt. So where, for example, we see that a lot of parents feel that they're not spending enough time with their children, they're actually spending more time with their children than almost any generation, because they're kind of driven for 2 reasons. One, they're kind of feeling that they're guilty and therefore they're driving themselves to spend more time. But secondly, children aren't going out as much as they used to. So actually children are spending more time in the home. So we're actually seeing that time spent with the children is actually more than ever before. Even down to the parents that we ask who worry about not spending enough time with their children, 71% will happily go, actually, I spend more time with my child than my parent did. And then we also have this best friend, this kind of hierarchy peer, this kind of equalization between parents and children, and the fact that actually we're seeing parents and children become best friends now. So, I kind of say that with an emphasis, but, I don't think my parents would ever really have called themselves my best friends. They'd have said that they're caring and nurturing and supportive and all the great things, and they're good parents. But I think that kind of best friend vernacular is something that's relatively new. And we see that 75% of dads, 61% of mums agree that they are best friends with their children. And that's more so with the millennials than it is with the Gen X. So we're seeing that increase over time and over generations. So we kind of got this, I don't want to use the word perfect storm, but maybe a triumvirate of different factors that all seem to be blowing towards First of all, parents are feeling stressed and feeling guilty and feeling worried that they're neglecting their children. And actually, there's quite a lot of research that states that children are spending exactly the same amount of quality time with their children now than they were 20 years ago. They're just spending more time in total. This thing called alone together time, so where they're in the same room and in the same environment, but not actually kind of engaging and together. But parents are stressed that they're neglecting their children. They're not spending enough time with them. However, they are spending more time with them than ever before. And also there's this relationship, as I kind of said before, this equalisation of relationship. And I think I see it with my children's friends calling me Morris, and it kind of weirds me out because, well, it doesn't weird me out, but I know that all of my friends would call my dad Mr. Wheeler, you know, and I called all my friends' parents like Mr. King and Mr. Stainton. I never even dreamed of ever calling. I still refer to some of my friends' parents as Mr. Stainton. I just can't get round to actually calling them their real name. So, you know, we're definitely seeing this kind of levelling out of hierarchy between adults and children. So all these things together, I think we're kind of seeing a situation where there's just much more desire and much more need and a much more stated want to co-consume content. So I've got a video, and then Josh is going to take over the next part.
So, I mean, I work most of the time, so I miss a lot of things. I don't think I spend as much time with Ruby as I should. But I definitely spend more time with Ruby than my parents.
Most of the time we're just spreading away from each other, and the only time we are really like close to each other is when we're watching a film or at a festival or something.
I think I'm probably more involved in what he does than my mum was.
Okay, in what way do you mean?
She never played board game with us. And we quite like playing board games, don't we, Felix?
With the children, or, you know, we'd go off, we'd do like, you know, go out and do like day visits and little trips and things like that, but it wasn't like right, I'm going to come home, we're going to play together kind of thing. My dad wasn't like that at all.
Yes, they were very much adults and child, and we were more family, I think.
And you had a bit more of a dialogue, maybe, than you did back in the day. A little more of a blurred line between that kind of
Children, you know, have a lot more to say, they have more opinions, they, you know, there's a lot more family discussions, like we'll sit down and be like, right, okay, you know, the house keeps getting messy, what are we all going to do about it, or what do you think your reward should be for doing what kind of behaviours, whereas my mum would just be like, this is how I expect it to be and that's it. Whereas I'd be more like, well, what do you think is a problem, or, you know, talk more to the children about stuff and let them, they have more of an opinion, more of a voice, I would say now.
Do you think it's easier for children now compared to when you were younger?
I think it's much more difficult.
I think there's a lot more pressure on them now, again because of social media and things, to look a certain way and to be a certain way. You know, that pretense that you've got to look a certain way or be a certain way. I think there's a lot more pressure on the kids now to be like that.
So thank you very much. I'm Josh, and from the video there and what Morris said, we see that there's a lot of change in family in terms of their dynamics and how much time they're spending with each other. So now we're going to look quite broadly at the interaction moments between parents and children, the reasons why they like to consume certain pieces of content together or do certain things, and we'll go through them one by one and hopefully try and get a whole picture at the end. So we asked children and parents generally, so which of the activities have you done purposely together over the last month? We sat down together to do. And we see that we have broadcast TV right at the top, which isn't really surprising. And then we have reading books, playing with toys, and that kind of filters down into the less traditional activities, so like playing console games and playing mobile games. We do see some differences across age and gender, the kind of things you'd expect. So parents and children are more likely to read books together if the child's slightly younger, same with playing toys, whereas playing console video games, if you're a boy or you're a slightly older child, parents and children are more likely to do those activities together. So when it comes down to looking at who enjoys these activities and which activities are enjoyed by both parents and children, we initially see, so if you have parents' levels of enjoyment across category on the left-hand side and then children on the right-hand side, and you can initially see that kind of huge step up where most activities, in fact, almost all of them except perhaps listening to music, are enjoyed a lot more by children. And we see that also the amount of enjoyment isn't kind of influenced by which activities were most likely to be done together. So broadcast TV, it was the most activity that children and parents did together, co-consumed, but wasn't necessarily the most enjoyed. And there are multiple layers to potentially why that might be. So if we focus on TV, for example, one of the reasons that parents and children spend time co-consuming TV together is predominantly because it's easy. There's a TV in every room. It's easy to get everybody together into that same room, especially if you have a large family. You know, the living room is that one area where you all sit together. And feeding into that kind of sense of easiness is passive. Parents, as much as that kind of perfect paradigm of parents wanting to spend all their time co-consuming, doing something active or engaging with their children, sometimes that can't happen. So TV, sitting in front of a TV, they can look at their emails, they can order stuff online, it's passive, and they can all do together. Again, same for flexibility. If you've got a short amount of time to spend together in the morning, TV can be put on for 15 minutes, same as in the evening. And also, slightly feeding into that, so SVOD was more enjoyable than broadcast TV. And that's partly because there's someone for everyone, whether you've got a 7-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 4-year-old, you'll be able to find something, or you're more likely to find something on SVOD that kind of suits everybody's needs. And there's a quote here that kind of summarizes that. So watching films together, it's the only way we can actually all get together and do something, and we can usually find something that everyone will like. When we look at who initiates these activities, we find that it's the activities that you enjoy personally that you're more likely to do. So playing with toys, the more child-focused activity, playing with toys, watching things on YouTube, even video games, which are generally a little bit more child-centric, they're a lot more likely to be initiated by the child themselves, whereas books, broadcast TV, music and audiobooks, there's still that level of kind of joint initiation, and again, sort of more of a focus on children, but parents, because they enjoy it more, are slightly more likely to initiate it than, for example, toys. And when we focus down on something like video games, we can also see differences across the parents, gender of the parents. So, for example, video games, dads are much more likely to initiate it, so they're the kind of initiated just by them, kind of the yellow block on the left-hand side, whereas mums, it's much more likely to be a child-focused decision. And kind of alongside that, we have this kind of preconception that dads are willing to, or have a need to kind of drag their children up to their level when it comes to viewing content. So the kind of example I can think of is Star Wars, for example. You might have a 3-year-old child who has no understanding of Star Wars or really necessarily an interest in it, but dads are like, yeah, come on, sit down with me, watch Star Wars. Whereas mums might be more willing to kind of go down to their level and view Paw Patrol, for example. Whereas this isn't necessarily something that we see. So we kind of found that even though we have this changing family dynamics where there's more mums kind of in full-time employment, professional jobs, dads are still more likely to be away from home in the evenings, generally because when you have younger children, it's more likely to be the mum who picks them up from school, makes them the dinner, and spends those last few hours. So because there's less time for dads generally to spend with their child, they're much more likely to do the activities that they personally enjoy. It's like, okay, you like Paw Patrol, I'm not that bothered, but you know what, I'll watch a movie for an hour because I didn't get to spend much time with you. Again, so we used a Star Wars analogy earlier. This is true for both mums and dads. You are much more likely to want to engage with the moments that you kind of enjoyed yourself as a child. So, for example, 85% of parents said that they enjoyed introducing their children to the stuff that they loved when they were younger. And again, so millennials, much more likely to have played mobile games or console video games. So is something that they want to do with their child a lot more than kind of Gen X, who wouldn't have had those experiences when they were younger or as kind of very young parents. And music, as something universally across kind of gender and age of the parent, is something that they enjoy passing down. I think we've probably all had our own experiences where your dad's been, come on, listen to this Pink Floyd album or something like that. So, and you're like, Jesus, what's going on with Dad? But another layer as well. So it's not just about personal enjoyment or sharing an experience or activity that you did when you were a child. It's about education as well. So reading specifically, and the viewing of some TV content, which we found through qualitative research. It's kind of about the education of the child and, yeah, not just enjoyment. So 58% of parents enjoy reading books with their child because it was a learning experience. And we also find from academic research and other pieces of research that we've seen recently that children are generally more engaged when they're sitting with a parent. If you think back to experiences, if you have children, getting them to watch something, they might get distracted, especially if it's educational, whereas you sit with them and you're there to encourage them. Even something like horrible histories, they're more likely to be engaged and want to share that moment with you and learn from it. So also, and probably quite obviously, but it's a lot about bonding these co-experiences together. So if we use the example of toys, even though a lot of parents, they don't have necessarily the time or inclination or imagination to engage with kind of role play with their children, it's still something that they know their child really enjoys. They don't get to spend a lot of time with them in these kind of co-consumption activities, so they're happy to play with dinosaurs and princesses or that kind of stuff because it's a positive bonding experience and you're there for a moment of joy with your child. And also there's this layer as well, which we've seen increase over the last few months, that parents are co-consuming with their children simply to monitor what they're watching. And this is quite high, so 40% of parents said that they'd watched YouTube videos with their child in the last month simply to see what they were watching. And second with gaming as well. So we have a short video at the end that kind of summarizes all these, well actually no, in a second after this slide, that summarizes all these points together and kind of gives some specific examples. And one of them is around gaming, especially sort of social online gaming, where you have the chance to interact with lots of different people who you don't necessarily know who they are. Parents want to make sure their children are kind of navigating that world in a safe way. Same with YouTube, where you potentially have unrestricted access to a myriad of content and people on those platforms. So we have a short video now that kind of summarizes those points, and then we'll go back to Morris.
You never watch TV in the morning?
With Daddy, I don't.
Okay, so sometimes with me.
Harry Potter. The kids love watching Harry Potter. We did sit and watch the whole lot together, didn't we?
We usually watch like Netflix on the
Yeah.
We do watch TV quite a lot, don't we? In the evenings after dinner, when Daddy takes Imogen upstairs, Felix and I will sit and watch something like Blue Peter or Operation Ouch, or it's primarily iPlayer and iPlayer and Netflix mostly.
To all the things that you watch, except Atlantic Treasure, everything else is what she's chosen, like Sherlock, and I just tagged along.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't watch Sherlock the first time, I'm not that interested, but watching the reviews is quite good.
Would you play dinosaurs invading a castle, Mum, or something like that?
Sometimes, more when he was younger than now. I'm not very good at imaginative play.
Okay.
But I would, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Daddy's better at that, isn't he?
We all enjoy it. It's just a bit of time with them, and I think because children are they're growing up differently to how I did when I was younger, so they don't necessarily want to sit and do the colouring and the reading, and so for me I'd rather do something with them that they enjoy doing.
With Felix, we don't tend to read the same books over and over anymore. Not now. We did when he was younger. Most of them I was happy with. There are a few that I'd rather we didn't read again, but if there were books that he really liked, then we sort of suck it up.
They play with their dad quite a bit. We're on Fortnite because Dad's got into it now, isn't he? But I don't play. We do play FIFA. I can play FIFA. It's just I'm not very gamey. Well, no, but I think because Daddy likes playing because he doesn't get a lot of time to play things with them. So obviously, if he played, then the kids go on and play with him.
Really, if you get time with Daddy, your favourite thing is to play computer games with him, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you choose the game?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
A bit of time for Daddy to share games that he likes
Okay.
with Felix.
Oh, no, that's all.
So well, that was one of the things I chose Bean Beach, was the first gaming that we were going to do online together.
Okay.
It's because of the chat functionality, and he could say things to people. So there's a few times he did things and I had to pull him up and say, look, you can't be saying that online. And I would have never known these things if I hadn't was engaging with that. So with Harry, not so much with you, but that will come. You know, making them think about what footprint they're leaving online, what they're saying to people. It's all recorded. It's never going to go away. You know, so that's going to feed in social media as well.
My dad has got like Martin Luther King activity books, so I would do them.
Okay.
But since I've already completed them, I just read them over with my dad, and we talk about Black history, and we talk about the important people.
Yes, listening to music.
Is that something you do?
I've introduced you to some of the best bands in the
No, I introduced myself.
I introduced you to ABBA.
No, I introduced myself to ABBA.
You listen to it and you recognise the genius of it. That's
When I was
great.
younger, I thought it was just kind of weird. But I like it now, kind of.
I love that interaction because there's that kind of ABBA interaction is very much the dad kind of saying, I introduce you to ABBA, and the daughter is almost kind of saying, no, you introduced me to your ABBA, but I discovered my own ABBA, which is far better than your ABBA, because your ABBA's sad and my ABBA's great. So there's kind of like, is this slightly weird moment where she's going, yes, but no, and kind of understanding that. So what do we do with this? All these various kind of consumption moments. Starting off with toys. Co-playing with toys is about bonding. So we did see particularly that parents actually, it was the number one thing for kids. It was like 70% enjoyment for kids. But for parents, it was like the fourth or the fifth thing that they enjoy. Most of the parents that we spoke to didn't really enjoy playing with toys with their children. As we saw with the lady there, when Josh asked about imaginative play, she's like, I'm not very good at imaginative play. I don't really like doing it. And actually, we did quite a few in homes on another project where we were saying, you know, would you like a co-play toy? And they're like, no, you know, there's a lot of, I like the idea of co-play, but actually the reality is that life's just going to get in the way. You know, with a lot of co-play toys, there's this unfulfilled expectation where parents go, if I buy a co-play toy, if I get a co-play toy where I have to play with my child, that's going to be a toy that I don't get out that often, because you know what? Playtime is a time where I can go, look, you go and play with your toys, I need to make dinner, or I need to go and phone my mum, or whatever it is that you need to do. So actually that kind of, I have to now sit down and play is something that a lot of parents are quite kind of turned off by. What they do enjoy doing is they do enjoy those moments of playing with their child, but you know what, that's a moment where it's more around watching my child enjoy something, and they don't want to take any of that away. So they don't mind those moments, but they are quite rare. So again, it's kind of more around experiencing your child's moment of joy rather than trying to create this co-play toy. From a gaming perspective, we are seeing more and more parents co-play with their children, you know, and a lot of Amanda's research was obviously showing how that can age up to grandparents. We asked the parents, you know, how would you make co-play games better? And they came up with kind of 5 different styles of games that they thought were really good for co-play between parents and children. First one is that competitive or handicapping competitive play. So, for example, a game of Mario Kart where if you're better than your son or your son's better than you, you can handicap that. So you can dial it up and down and give yourself a kind of fair advantage or make sure it's a bit more level. Kids hate it when they go, you let me win. So actually something that kind of naturally dampens your skill is something that parents thought were quite good. Cooperative team versus team gameplay. So, for example, where you might be able to club up with your family. So you and your children could be in one team and you could play against another child or another family or another clan. So we saw that with things like Clash of Clans and Clash Royale and things like Boom Beach, where you might be able to team up and do something together as a family unit against another. same game, different roles. So again, this is like the gaming version of the grandma in goal and the boy kind of shooting at goal. You've got, you're both playing the same game, but you're kind of playing different roles. So we had a few people talk about, for example, in Lego, one person could be driving the truck, which actually can be quite tricky, and then somebody else can be in the back squirting people with water or doing whatever they want to do in the back of the truck. So it's the same game that you're playing together, but there's a different activity involved. And then finally, a lot of parents talked about how they enjoy doing turn-based games, particularly dads, where they might not have a lot of together time, where they can, for example, have a game at work and do something like a Words with Friends, where they can have their go, and then their child, when they get home from school, can then have their go, and they can kind of interact and play together when they're apart as well as when they're together. So gaming was particularly popular. Co-viewing TV. What we did want to try and do was answer the question of should you create co-viewing TV or should you create non-co-viewing TV? As with all of these situations, it's nuanced. There is no right or wrong answer, but to give you some kind of pros and cons. So if you were to create a show that's specifically around co-viewing, the advantages are you get a more sustainable audience. It's easier to keep a parent and a child engaged, and it's more easier for them to retain and stay with you because the parents are less fickle, so they're more likely to have that as a bit of a ritual, and therefore it's much easier to retain that. You do get deeper engagement with your content. So when parents and children are sat down together, much less likely to be switching channels and flicking around. You're much more likely to sit down and engage it and consume it much more deeply. So Josh was talking about how co-viewing of educational content leads to better educational outcomes. That's because the children are actually engaging much deeper with the content when they are consuming it with their parents. So the same is true with non-educational content. Children are consuming it and engaging with it in the same depth. You get greater parental love. So obviously, if it's something that parents really, really like, then that's good news, and that can filter into merchandising opportunities. So, for example, that's great for soft lines. We do see that shows that have a lot of co-viewing are more likely to have good soft lines for children, because if a parent loves a show, then they don't mind dressing their children up in stuff that they enjoy. So we see much more children running around in Hey Dougie pajamas than you might do in other pajama sets that the parents don't like because they feel it's over commercial or whatever that reason may be. And it's also easier to market and easier to retain because you can talk to the adults. So where an adult is the one that's actually part of that viewing pattern, it's much easier to engage them in social media, to reach out to them, to contact them, and to get them to come back and watch again. Whereas obviously if it's just children that are watching it, it's much harder to do that unless you're doing it through the channels already. As far as negatives, it's really hard to write for two audiences. There's a reason why Hey Dougie has won BAFTAs. There's a reason why The Simpsons has been going for 20 years, and that's because they've got incredible writers who just managed to nail writing for two audiences. But that is not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of work that needs to go in making sure that you're hitting both at the same time. We saw in the creative keynote yesterday where Horrible Histories were talking about how they manage that process, that creative process of hitting two people at the same time. It's really tricky, so it's not something that's particularly easy. And typically those co-viewed TV programs can be less toyetic because there's usually more of a parental engagement and they feel that they don't like those toyetic shows, so that you can struggle slightly sometimes with the toyetic nature of them. But from a non-co-viewing TV, so should you create more of your Paw Patrols or Fortnite videos on YouTube or Baby Bum, which are much more focused at a specific audience, pros are you can be laser focused with your audience. Paw Patrol know that they're creating great TV for 3 to 5 year olds, and that's just all that they focus on. So they can really make sure that they hone and refine that to within an inch of its life. They don't need to worry about, is it hitting all these multiple levels? So they can be much more targeted and much, much cleverer with refining that storyline, that narrative, and those characters. And therefore, it's much easier to be toyetic. You can put in those toy moments. It's much easier when you've got a kind of child-focused TV show. The negatives are, if you're just talking to the child, if it's not coming out of their kind of, if it's not in their top 3 or top 4 shows, it's really hard, because ultimately that's not something that's going to end up bubbling up onto a parent's radar. If it's not something that parents seeing their children engaging with a lot, or if they see that, oh, it's their number 5 show or their number 6 show, it's not going to end up on the birthday list. It's not going to end up on the Christmas list. So it's much, much harder. You've got to be really loved to make these work. And also it's harder to market, because you're talking to a child audience. It's much harder to reach them and engage them. We also had a slide on books, and I got called out for the fact that I removed the slide on books for time, and I've got 1 minute, so I'm going to tell you what the slide on books said. But the slide on books, ultimately, there's a few different interactive formats that we're seeing working quite well. So parents just generally enjoy quite nice stories to read. So we had quite a few parents talking about how they liked the cadence of some of the Julia Donaldson books, because they were just nice to read. There were other book formats that they talked about. So there was the one, I can't remember it, and you have to read every single word on the page, and it makes you sound stupid as a parent, and you have to roar and do all these kind of crazy different things. And so they really liked that format as well. And then there was another book which had a spotlight kind of mechanic, where you and the child would kind of engage and try and find certain things on the page using this kind of spotlight mechanic. So conclusions. Co-consumption of content is really good for a family. You know, the family that plays together stays together. The family that watches TV together stays together. So it's really good at strengthening bonds, bringing people together, enabling them to have a similar thing that they enjoy, a similar vernacular, to be able to kind of have something that's in common. We also know that children learn more. They're deeper engaged with that content. And also that when parents sit down and watch content with their children, it actually gives a physical, emotional benefit from that. So there's a real kind of emotional benefit for co-consuming content. Despite parents spending more time with their children, actually the amount of joint activity hasn't really changed since, well, for like almost 20 years or over, almost 20 years. So, you know, parents do want to spend more time with their children, but life often gets in the way. So actually that kind of quality time is really just that half an hour a day of co-consumption, and that really hasn't changed since 2005. So there is this perception, you know, that I hear a lot, that, oh, it's all about co-consumption now. We need to make sure that we're doing more stuff that hits on multiple levels. And while parents are spending more time together, they're not necessarily actually doing more in co-consumption of content together. So leading on from that, it's really important to understand and separate the difference between a stated desire and actual behavioural actions. Lots of parents that we spoke to said, "Oh, I'd love a TV show that, you know, that hits on both levels. That's brilliant." And you go, "Okay, you know, do you sit down and watch these shows?" You go, "No, you know, actually, it's more Paw Patrol." I'm not going to say who said it yesterday, but I thought it was brilliant, and actually something that when she said it was quite kind of startling to everyone in the room. But then everyone kind of went, "Oh, she's totally right," though. When someone said, actually, what parents really want is something to make their kids happy and for them to shut up. You know, and actually, we do see a lot of parents requiring that. You know, are you happy and are you not bothering me? So actually, that co-consumption, they love the idea of that, but realistic, it's like, please just do this and watch this. So they will state that they want to have, you know, again, they've stated that they want to play with toys with their child, but the reality is that they just don't, and they don't have that time. So you've got to make sure that you understand those differences between those two. Creating content that is co-consumed, again, isn't necessarily the holy grail. It isn't, you know, again, I said it's really hard, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that you have to do. It's not necessarily something that you should strive for. You know, there are compromises in creating content that is co-consumption. You know, again, a lot of the time, particularly with toys and with video games, make a toy that a kid really, really loves. That's something that they really, really engage with, and you'll find a lot of parents are happy to engage with that because they just ultimately want to use it as a moment to bond and just to be there when their child is really loving it. And then finally, not everyone needs to enjoy, that's kind of my point I just made a second ago, but not everyone needs to enjoy the co-consumption of content. Sometimes it's just about being there and experiencing that joy and experiencing that moment. And so often that's enough. Thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions?
So I was wondering, one of the earlier points that you raised was about how parents are spending more time with their kids today than ever before. It's Jess.
I thought for a minute, that's Jess.
You're like, that's Jess. That is Jess in the back of the room. And so I was wondering, did you talk to them about what they're doing during this time? So the reason I ask is that a new study just came out this week showing that parents are more likely to be in spaces with their kids than ever before, but at the same time, they're more likely to be on their phones during these spaces. So did you actually talk about, are they actually spending time with them when they're there, or are they more physically present but not maybe sharing?
No, it's that together alone.
It's the together alone,
yeah. So, as I say, I think one of the slides earlier talked about how time together has gone from like 4 hours up to 10 hours per week. But actually, it's still just 2.5 hours of actual time together when they're co-consuming content. And the rest of the time, they're in the same space, and the reason why they're there is just that children aren't going out and, doing the cliched running around the woods like I used to, that sort of thing. But no, the parents are living life on their own phones, doing their own thing. And so actually it's, almost that quality time of coming together for that 30 minutes is probably is more important.
That's what I was thinking. I think it's even more important than ever before, because sometimes you see headlines like, oh, parents are spending way more time with their kids. I'm like, well, I think we need to nuance this and think about how they're doing it. So I think those 30 minutes become even more valuable.
Yeah, they're in the same space rather than spending time.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.